In a deadly Colorado blizzard, a faint knock at Colt Hardin's door drags him into a fight for survival, where an Apache woman's secret could reshape the fate of an entire land. The wind screamed down from the San Juan peaks, not in fleeting gusts, but in relentless torrents, an unseen flood crashing through pines and burying the valley in white. It wasn't just cold. It clawed through coats, gnawed at bones, and froze breath into brittle clouds. Amid that endless howl, a faint knock pierced the silence, barely there, like a whisper from a ghost. Durango, Colorado, winter of 1885. Snow had fallen for 3 days straight, erasing horizons and swallowing landmarks until the world was a gray blur. By day 3, shapes didn't matter anymore. You listened for what didn't belong. Colt Hardin's cabin clung to the tree line, where forest met open ground. Rough-hewn logs, moss-stuffed cracks, and a slanted roof fought the snow's weight. Smoke rose from the chimney, straight as a bullet, until the wind shredded it. A tarp-covered woodpile stood by the shed, anchored with stones against the storm. Colt was hauling his second armload of pine when the sound came. 3 soft, deliberate knocks, too steady for wind, too small for trouble. Or so he thought. He froze, axe balanced in calloused hands. This trail wasn't a path folks stumbled on. The nearest ranch was 8 miles south. The mining road twisted farther north. Visitors meant one thing: desperation. He drove the axe into the chopping block, brushed snow from his sleeve, and trudged to the porch, boots crunching through fresh drifts. Each step sank deep, the snow reclaiming his tracks in seconds. His breath hung like fog, trailing him like a shadow. The knocks came again, slower, weaker, as if the hand behind them was fading. Then a voice, thin and trembling. "Let me in. I beg." On the porch, ice-crusted boards creaked underfoot. The wind lashed sideways, sharp as shattered glass. There she stood, a figure draped in frost-stiffened buckskin rags, ice fringing the edges. Snow matted her black hair. Her bare feet, swollen and red, pressed into the boards. The wind tugged her tattered hem, exposing legs raw with welts, chapped by cold. Her knees shook, not from fear, but from a body running out of warmth. One more gust, and she'd snap like a dry branch. Colt's first thought was to turn away. The mountains bred ghosts. Some wore faces until the cold took them. Strangers brought questions, and questions brought trouble. But something held him fast. A memory of another winter, another knock he hadn't answered in time, hands he'd found too late, still trembling. Or maybe it was her voice, not demanding but pleading, the sound of someone half gone clinging to hope. He studied her. A bone necklace hung at her throat, 4 notched beads and an obsidian disc etched with a spiral. Her shoulders curled inward, guarding something fragile. Her eyes didn't beg or challenge. They waited, steady as stone. The wind roared, rattling the stovepipe. Colt's jaw tightened. He stepped aside, pushing the door open. Warmth spilled out, wood smoke and the soft tick of the stove. She moved past him, steps careful, like the floor might vanish. Inside, the cabin was one dim room, lit only by the stove's glow. Colt barred the door and watched her hover at the threshold, as if claiming space was a debt she couldn't pay. Snow melted from her shoulders, pooling on the planks. He fed 2 pine splits into the stove. Flames surged, casting gold across the walls. "Sit," he said, not turning, "by the heat." She hesitated, then glided to the stool, feet whispering on wood. The firelight caught her obsidian necklace, sparking like a caged storm. Colt grabbed a tin mug, poured kettle water, and stirred in coffee grounds with a thread of honey. He offered it. She eyed the mug, then him, before her fingers closed around it. The first sip shut her eyes. not in joy, but in relief, like life seeping back. "Easy," he said. "Heat tricks the blood, makes it rush when it should creep." Her eyes opened, studying him over the mug's rim. A flicker, trust, or maybe just less fear, crossed her gaze for the first time. Outside, the storm battered the walls. Inside, the stove hummed, steady and patient. For now, it was enough. The storm pressed its face to the cabin windows until the glass went milk white, as if someone had pulled a curtain of frost across the outside world. The wind didn't scream. It held its breath, as if even it was waiting to see what would happen next. The pines on the lower skirts of the Mogollon groaned under the weight of 3 days' snow, shedding powder in soft avalanches that blurred the line between ground and sky. Somewhere far off, a branch cracked under ice, a sound sharp enough to feel in the teeth. Inside, the stove ticked and settled, its iron glowing dull as a banked ember. Colt Hardin moved like a man used to small rooms in long winters, quiet, efficient, nothing wasted. He set a split log just so, angling it for air, and the flame rose without asking permission. Years alone in these mountains had taught him that fire, like people, behaved best when given the right space and the right fuel. The Apache woman, Neve Whitebird, slept where the heat could reach her feet first. Her soles were wrapped in strips torn from Colt's spare shirt, greased with bear tallow to keep the flesh from cracking. A wool blanket swallowed her shoulders, but a sliver of bone necklace still showed at her throat. 4 notched beads and a flat piece of obsidian scratched with a spiral. Even in this dim light, the black stone caught the firelight, a stubborn glint in the middle of winter's gray. Colt checked the latch on the door. 2 wooden pegs, 1 iron hook he'd hammered himself during his first winter here, when a door was more than wood and hinges. It was a promise. Above the mantel, the rifle rested in its place, where his hand could find it without thought. On the hearth, a tin cup sat waiting. Half water, half coffee, a spoonful of honey melted in. When Neva stirred, he was there, tilting it toward her lips. She drank slowly, eyes tracking him the way a wary animal watches a waterhole, grateful, suspicious, and too tired to run. "Easy," he said again, his voice low and steady. "Heat's a liar, tells your blood to race when it ought to walk." Outside, snow shifted on the roof with a muffled sigh. Not a step, just the settling weight of winter. The cabin seemed to breathe in time with the storm, expanding with the fire's exhale, contracting when the wind leaned against the walls. Colt listened for a long moment and heard nothing but the quiet thoughts of cold weather. He salted down a haunch of venison, trimmed the rind from yesterday's cornbread, and set beans to soak in a black pot that had outlived 2 cabins and 1 fire. He counted wood stacks by habit, laid cartridges out like rosary beads for a faith he didn't keep, and checked the snares in his mind before his feet found the door. When you lived alone long enough, your mind kept score, so your tongue didn't have to. Neve woke again to a kind of silence that follows pain. She blinked slowly, not darting. There was dignity in measured movements after a fall. Colt set the cup back into her hands without another word. Her fingers trembled but held. Steam curled against her cheekbones before vanishing into the stray hair that had escaped her braid. The end had been cut crude, with his camp knife, leaving a short, uneven tail. It wasn't ceremony, it was survival. The severed length lay on the hearthstones, bound with a strip of red dyed fiber. She hadn't burned it, not yet. Colt pulled a chair near, but not too close. Distance was a courtesy when a person's whole life had been stripped down to skin and breath. The wind leaned harder into the eastern wall, like an animal testing a fence. "You need a pain draft?" he asked. Her voice came like a match struck in a cold barn, small, sudden light. "Number only time." Time was something the mountain had in stock, if you paid with quiet and work. Above them, strips of jerky swayed lazily in the warm air. The smell of smoke and meat built a roof over the room. Neve's eyes drifted upward, then toward the mantel. Beneath the rifle, something glittered, a nickel coin with a hole punched through the center, strung on rawhide and hanging from a nail. "Marker," Colt said when he caught her looking. "For what?" "Who I owed, or who owed me." He didn't say which. "Some debts you don't name unless you mean to collect. Or pay." Then he added with a thin half-smile, the kind only a man from the frontier could pull off. "Out here, debts don't vanish. Just wait for the right saddle to ride back in." The fire popped in the grate as if it agreed. By morning, the storm lay quiet as a felled bull. The whole basin glazed with a white sheen that swallowed sound. The sky had opened to tin and pearl, and the pines along the Mogollon rim shrugged off their night weight in slow avalanches, hissing when sunlight touched them. Smoke lifted from Colt Hardin's stovepipe in a narrow, unwavering thread, straight as a rifle barrel. Inside, the fire had sunk to coals, their glow pulsing like the heartbeat of the cabin. The air smelled of coffee, iron, and damp wool. Neva Whitebird woke sitting up, as if her bones had learned to sleep while listening. She tested both feet. The pain was still there, but now it stayed contained in her jaw instead of climbing to her throat. Raw sting had turned into a dull, hard truth, a thing she could carry. She stood, slow and deliberate, claiming each inch of floor like a hunter stalking an unfamiliar path. Colt Hardin was already by the door, hat brim low over eyes that missed nothing. He'd shaved with a cold blade and a tin mirror. No soap, no ceremony. The cold made his fingers ache, but he flexed them, listening through the logs as if the cabin's walls were only a thin layer of wind. "Gonna look to the stock," he said, sliding the latch. His tone didn't ask for discussion. He stepped outside into bright cold that cut the lungs clean. The cows stood huddled in the lean sun, breath pluming in steady bursts. Against the chicken coop, a drift had risen high as a saddle horn. He shoveled a shoulder-wide notch through it, every throw of snow cutting a clean arc against the blue. Overhead, a hawk rode a lazy circle, the sky so clear you could almost hear the air move around its wings. From the tree line, far enough to be a trick of the light, Jonah Trace watched the yard with the patience of a man who'd seen storms leave more danger than they brought. He had followed the last of the snow along the rim, kept his horse tucked in the lee of a fir, and made no fire. Men who lived long in the high country learned to let the cold do the talking. He'd seen the woman yesterday, barefoot, braid ragged, a blanket clinging to her shoulders more from resolve than warmth. He'd seen Colt lift her, carry her inside. Folks did strange arithmetic in deep winter, and Jonah knew the sums could get bloody. He slid down from his perch now that the day had a spine, leading his roan along wind-scoured lanes that left no clear prints. He didn't aim to spook a man like Colt Hardin. Trust was like dry kindling up here. Once burned, you had to cut new. In the cabin, Neva poured steaming water into a tin cup, the kettle's hiss filling the silence. Her eyes mapped the room, every nail, every jar, the way the rope on the wall was coiled twice, not thrice. She stopped at the shelf where a folded photograph lay face down. She didn't touch it. There was a kind of mercy in leaving some faces in the dark. Colt returned, boots knocking ice from the porch boards. "Tracks melt. Fast in sun like this," he said, hanging his coat. "Storm flattened most, but not all." Neve didn't ask what he'd found. She knew the kinds of shapes that followed a woman in white country she didn't own. Her hands tightened around the cup until the tin edge pressed a crescent into her palm. "Someone will come." "They usually do." Colt poured himself coffee, black as a gun barrel. "Question is, what for?" Before she could answer, the sound came. A crow's call, sharp, deliberate. It didn't belong to any crow. Colt's eyes flicked to the window, then to the rifle above the mantel. He crossed the room in 2 strides and took it down. Outside, Jonah emerged from the tree line, leading his roan, his other hand raised to show it was empty. Colt opened the door just enough to lean out. "You took your time," he said. "Time's cheaper than blood," Jonah replied, "and I've seen both wasted." They spoke in low tones while the wind teased at the edges of their coats. Jonah told him about the trail he'd found, moccasins, light and disciplined, cutting across from the Holbrook side. Not elk, not deer, not friendly. "Redwater?" Colt asked. "Could be," Jonah said. "Could also be someone wearing Redwater's shoes to make us think so." They didn't waste words on what that would mean. Colt stepped back, holding the door for Jonah, and both men entered the cabin where Neva waited, her eyes moving between them like she could read a conversation without hearing it. Jonah nodded to her. "Ma'am." She returned it, just barely. Trust would take more than a greeting. Colt poured Jonah coffee, then leaned against the table. "What's moving?" "2 kinds of trouble," Jonah said. "One knows your name. The other don't care." Colt's jaw tightened. "The kind that don't care is worse." They talked in the short, sharp sentences of men who had been in bad places together before. Outside, the snow was starting to glaze over, turning from powder to a crust that held a man's weight for a heartbeat before giving way. By noon, tracks would be readable from a ridge away. Neve set her cup down. "If it is Redwater," she said, "they may come to talk, or to take back what they think is theirs." "Which are you?" Jonah asked. Her eyes didn't leave his. "Neither, but the wind carries words and I can't say which ones reach them." Colt glanced at her, reading something in her face that made his next words careful. "If they come, you stay inside. Let me and Jonah do the talking." She didn't agree. She didn't disagree. She only pulled the blanket tighter and looked toward the tree line, as if expecting shapes to emerge any moment. "If you were Colt, would you let Neve go with the Redwater Scouts? Or risk a fight to keep her? Tell me in the comments, because this choice could change everything." The cedar fire kept itself small, just a disciplined orange core, no higher than a man's hand. Smoke rose in a thin braid and vanished before the wind could carry its scent to the wrong ears. Every stick on the fire had been chosen for silence. Even the resin was scraped to keep it from popping. This wasn't a camp for warmth. It was a place for talking without being heard. 3 Redwater men stood around the flame, blankets gathered over one shoulder like storm clouds, folded and tied. The eldest had ash painted in 2 clean bars across his face. His stillness was the kind that made you think of rocks, holding stories long after rivers forgot them. The other 2 were younger, but their eyes had winter in them, not spring. Colt Hardin and Neve Whitebird stopped 3 strides from the circle. No one offered to close the gap. The snow between them was wind-packed and glittered under a thin sun. Above, the Mogollon Rim stretched like a granite sentence written across the sky, stern, patient, final. Up on the flank of the slope, hidden in brush, Jonah Trace lay on his stomach, chin resting on his forearms, hat brim shading his eyes. He wasn't just watching the 3 men by the fire. He was also watching the far whiteness where the world thinned into cliff edge. Out there, another shadow moved, the faint thread of a rider stitching his way toward trouble. Jonah didn't need a closer look to know who wore that pale hat. Emmett Bishop was on the move. The eldest Redwater lifted his palm, not to Colt, but to the cold itself. He spoke first in Apache, then in a deliberate English that kept the rhythm of the first language. "Dawn is a good time to soften hard words." Neve didn't reply immediately. She let the cadence pass through her, as if weighing each syllable. When she did speak, it was in Apache. You spoke me out of belonging. You gave winter my name." The elder took the words without flinching. "Names can be warmed again. Old women sing. New names are braided. We have sweet words for sweet ears." Colt stood silent, letting the conversation run in a tongue he didn't own. Men who interrupted other people's languages often ended up buying more trouble than they could carry. But his eyes never left the younger scout to the left. His left shoulder sat easy. His right one was stiff, hiding something under the blanket. A weapon, most likely. Neve's voice cooled. "Some words are not sweet, no matter who sings them." One of the younger scouts shifted his weight. The movement was small, but Jonah saw it from above and tensed, hand easing toward his rifle. The wind carried the faintest jingle of tack from the ridge beyond, the kind of sound you only heard when a rider was close and moving slow. Bishop was keeping just out of sight, circling like a wolf looking for the best angle. The elder finally turned to Colt, his gaze measuring. "You keep her. You keep our debt. We come to carry both home." Colt's voice was low and even. "She's not something you carry like a sack of corn. She walks where she chooses." "She chose once," the elder said. "She can choose again." Neve's chin lifted a fraction. "And if I don't?" The elder's eyes softened in a way that didn't reach his mouth. "Then winter will still take what belongs to it." Jonah shifted for a better view of the far ridge. The pale hat was closer now, weaving between cedar shadows, using the land as cover. He wasn't here to join the talk. He was here to use it. Colt felt the air changing, the same feeling he got when clouds stacked too fast on the horizon. "If you came for her," he said, "come honest. Don't bring shadow riders to the rim." The elder didn't react, but one of the younger scouts flicked a glance toward the slope behind Colt. That was all the confirmation he needed. Bishop's presence was known to them, maybe even expected. "Then we're done here," Colt said. The elder's gaze moved back to Neva. "Not yet." Silence spread like frost. Somewhere above them, a jay let out a sharp, mocking call. Jonah's eyes cut from the red watermen to the pale brim moving ever closer. Bishop was picking his moment. The elder's next words were slow, deliberate. "There are debts here, Hardin. Debts you do not see. You took her in when the storm could have claimed her. That makes you part of our story." "I didn't take her to write a story," Colt said. "I took her so she'd live." "And living comes with a price," the elder replied. Before Colt could answer, Bishop's voice floated in from the ridge, a lazy drawl that didn't match the tension in the air. "Seems like a fine morning for a gathering." Every head turned. Bishop rode into view at a walk, white hat bright against the dark cedars. 6 men followed, rifles across their saddles. They stopped just inside speaking distance, horses stamping in the crusted snow. "Morning, folks," Bishop said, tipping his hat. "Didn't know I'd be interrupting a family reunion." Colt shifted his stance, rifle low but ready. "You're not invited." "Neither are you," Bishop said easily, eyes sliding to Neva. "But here we are." The elder Redwater's expression didn't change, but the air seemed to grow sharper. "This is not your fire," he told Bishop. "Maybe not," Bishop said, "but I've got business with what's standing around it." Jonah, still prone above, muttered under his breath, "Hell, this is the wrong kind of three-way dance." Colt's voice cut through the cold. "You came here looking for trouble, Bishop, but you should know, trouble's already here." For a moment, no one moved. The cedar fire popped once, a single seed snapping in the heat. Snow whispered down from a low branch. Then Bishop smiled, thin, sharp, and full of calculation. "Well now," he said, "looks like I get to see who wants her more." Neva stood between them, the cedar smoke curling around her. She looked at Bishop, then at the Redwater elder, then finally at Colt. Her voice, when it came, was steady. "I choose to walk my own trail." The elder's jaw tightened, but he inclined his head. "Then we will see where that trail leads." Bishop's smile didn't falter. "So will I." Jonah's finger hovered over the trigger, waiting for one wrong move to start the avalanche. But no shot came. Not yet. Dawn came up thin and pewter. A cold coin slipped under the door. The ridge wore a ribbon of mist, and frost laced the bunch grass like old lace on a Sunday dress. Colt Hardin moved quiet through the cabin, boots soft on plank, breath held long, packing not with panic, but with the care of a man who'd broken camp in the dark before. Every motion was measured, like he was laying out pieces of a puzzle that had to fit perfectly if the day was to end in one piece. The coffee pot ticked once on the stove and went still. He left it there. Fire left a tongue, and tongues traveled. Gear went on the table, edge to edge. A bedroll scrubbed thin at the elbows. A tin of cartridges, a strip of jerky in brown paper, a whetstone shaped like river-smoothed bone. The Henry rifle lay oiled and ready, patient as a hound. His hat sat crowned down beside a coil of rope and the old compass that always pointed heart first to nowhere. Outside, the cold made the boards groan. In the pasture, Shoshone, his bay gelding, shook his mane and turned an ear toward the timber, like he'd heard a name he didn't favor. Somewhere farther off, a single crow called and was answered by silence thick as wool. From the small side room, Neva Whitebird stepped out, shawl folded tight, hair freshly braided in 2 lines, meeting at the nape with a strip of red cloth. Her hands were busy stitching the mouth of a small cloth bundle with sinew that had seen other winters. She wasn't taking much. Women turned out of one life learned fast what belonged to them, their breath, their feet, and what they could carry at a run. She tucked the bundle into the breast of Colt's coat, right where warmth lived. No words passed. It was an exchange sealed in silence, the kind of understanding that didn't need witness. "We're off the main trace," Colt said, his voice low so it wouldn't wake the valley. "East spur skirts the Cholla Flats, crosses a dry wash where the lava teeth show. We move light, leave no picture for the snow to remember." "I can walk," she said simply. He believed her. Still, he set a second canteen on the table, checked the stopper against his thumb, then tied it to his saddle roll. In the corner, Jonah Trace sat on a 3-legged stool like a heron at a creek crossing, long, unworried, and not about to be moved until he'd said what he came to say. He'd arrived before dawn, 2 soft knocks like the past asking to be let in, and now rolled a cigarette with fingers clean as a parson's. "You sure about east?" Jonah asked without looking up. "West gets you into Pignon and Broken Stone, harder to track and brush." "Harder to travel, too," Colt replied. "We need distance before noon, not a fight with Rock and God." "Rock and God ain't your only quarrel," Jonah said, licking the paper closed. "You got 2 kinds of trouble looking for you. One knows your name, the other don't care." He struck a match, let the first curl of smoke rise, then crushed it dead between finger and thumb before the room could learn his smell. "You think on that." Neva knelt by the hearth, pinched ash into a small buckskin packet, tying it with a leather thong. She slipped it into the same place as the cloth bundle. When she stood, the air in the room felt different, as if she'd drawn a circle you only noticed once you tried to leave it. "What's in the bundle?" Colt asked, not to pry, but to accept its weight. "Names," she said. "The ones I keep, and the one I let go." That was enough. A man doesn't ask to see inside a woman's medicine, not if he means to ride beside her. They stepped onto the porch. The air had that glassy quality that made sound travel too far. East, the sky held a pale bruise of day not yet decided. West, a strip of cloud lay low over the Mogollon rim, like smoke refusing to rise. Colt patted Shoshone's neck, felt the warmth under the winter coat, nerves riding up from ground to withers. Somewhere in the timber, a twig snapped under something too deliberate to be wind. A mile out, The snow lost its crust to powder that swallowed ankles, then thinned to patches where black rock jutted like knuckles through a white glove. Juniper shadows lay long and blue. Cholla lifted their mean, gorgeous arms like wounded men lifting their last argument. Colt walked beside the horse to confuse their trail. The old trick of making sign read like a bad story. Neve kept half a step behind, breath steady, shawl pinned tight. Jonah ranged to the rear like a watchdog, letting the landscape move until it told on itself. They took the east spur where basalt spilled in a chain of black teeth. Here, the wind wrote nothing. Here, a tracker had to work. By mid-morning, they reached the dry wash. Its bed was a pale scar twisting through the land, rimmed with mesquite and the bones of old cottonwoods. Colt paused, crouching to study a print in the silt. Not hoof. Not moccasin. A boot print, wide-heeled, the tread worn smooth in the center. Too heavy for a drifter, too deliberate for a lost man. Jonah joined him. Bishops, he said, not guessing but stating. Colt's jaw flexed. He's ahead of us. Neve's eyes narrowed at the print. She didn't speak, but her hand brushed the bone at her throat, the obsidian spiral warm against her palm. They moved on, climbing the far bank. The land beyond opened into rolling flats where the wind could see you for miles. Colt set a hard pace, every step trading comfort for time. The sun climbed, and with it, the chance their sign would be spotted. Near noon, they found the second sign, a cigarette butt, still warm when Jonah picked it up between thumb and forefinger. The tobacco was sweet-rolled, a taste Bishop favored. "He's close," Jonah said. "Close enough to smell us," Colt replied. He scanned the horizon, then the low ridges to the north. "We need cover." They veered toward a cut in the land, where ancient lava had cooled into tall, narrow fins. Between them, the wind was muffled, and the light came in narrow shafts. Colt led Shoshone through, the horse's hooves ringing once on stone. When they reached the other side, Jonah dropped into a crouch. "Two sets of tracks here," he said. "One's Bishop, the other's lighter, moccasin, Redwater." "They're hunting each other," Colt said. "And we're walking the line between." The air inside the lava fins felt trapped, as if it had been waiting centuries to carry sound. Each narrow passage was a throat, each boulder a tooth. Shadows ran long and cold, stretching like black water over the ground. Colt kept Shoshone's reins short, his eyes moving between the jagged skyline above and the thin trail winding through. Jonah Trace moved ahead, slow, hat brim low. He was reading the ground the way some men read psalms, soft, careful, not missing a word. His fingers touched the powdery grit near a rock edge. The wind couldn't get in here, so what was written stayed written. He looked back at Colt. They're close, real close, Bishop's boots, and a Redwater print right on top of his. Someone's shadowing the shadow. Neva Whitebird stayed near Colt, shawl tight, eyes not on the ground but on the walls, as if the black rock could speak. The obsidian spiral at her throat caught a shard of light and held it. Her breathing was steady, but her hand brushed the bundle in Colt's coat, habit or warning he couldn't tell. From somewhere ahead, a sharp metallic sound cracked the stillness, two horses snorting, followed by the faint scrape of iron on stone. Jonah froze, one hand lifting in a silent hold. Colt stopped Shoshone mid-step, feeling the gelding's muscles bunch. Then came the voice. Not Bishop, not Redwater, something new. "Hardin," it called, slow and easy. "Didn't figure I'd find you wedged in here like a badger." Colt knew that drawl. Calder Voss, a bounty man out of Abilene, quick with a trigger and quicker with a sail. He worked for whoever stacked the coin higher. Colt hadn't seen him in 2 years, but there was no mistaking that voice. "What's your business, Voss?" Colt called back, keeping his tone flat. "Oh, just hunting," Voss replied. "Got word, there's a half-breed woman worth more than her weight in silver if you bring her breathing." Imagine my surprise when the trail led me to you. Neve didn't flinch, but the air around her felt colder. Colt stepped forward, voice cutting sharper. "You'll turn around and ride out." Voss chuckled. "You offering me a better price?" Before Colt could answer, a sudden rustle echoed from the left passage. A red water scout lunged into view, bow drawn, the arrowhead aimed at Voss. But before he could loose, a rifle cracked from above. The scout spun, fell against the rock, and slid to the ground. The shot came from Bishop's pale-hatted silhouette high on the fin's edge. "Looks like we're all neighbors now," Bishop called down. "Might as well have ourselves a meeting." Jonah swore under his breath. 3 corners to the knife now. Voss grinned, stepping into the open. "Well, Bishop, I ain't picky. I'll take my prize from whoever drops first." The standoff lasted a heartbeat too long. Then a second Redwater man burst from the shadows, firing a musket into the rock near Bishop's feet. Shards of lava spat into the air. Bishop scrambled back, cursing, his men shouting from somewhere beyond sight. Colt used the chaos. "Jonah, right pass," he barked. Jonah swung to the right-hand corridor, rifle up, covering Neva as Colt pulled her toward the narrow gap between 2 leaning spires. Shoshone squeezed through, hooves striking sparks on the stone. Behind them, the Finns erupted with shouts in 3 languages and the drumbeat of gunfire. They emerged into a small bowl of rock, open to the sky but ringed on all sides. Bad ground to be trapped in, unless you had a way out. Neve moved to the far wall, her hands finding a crack only she seemed to see. "This way," she said, voice low but urgent. "Old trail, my grandfather brought me here." Colt didn't question. They slipped into the fissure, single file, the walls close enough to scrape shoulders. The sound of the fight faded to a muffled roar. Halfway through, Jonah stopped dead. "Colt," he said quietly, "we're not alone." From the dark ahead, a shadow separated from the rock. A figure stepped forward, a woman older than Neva, wrapped in a blanket stitched with red diamonds. Her face was lined like dry riverbeds, but her eyes burned clear. "Neve Whitebird," she said, in Apache first, then in English. "You carry something that belongs to me." Neve's hand went to the bundle in Colt's coat. Her voice was tight. "It's not yours anymore." The woman's gaze didn't waver. "It was never yours." The fissure narrowed until the rock pressed close enough to scrape knuckles. Above, a ribbon of pale sky cut through the darkness, thin as a whip crack. The woman with the red diamond blanket blocked the way ahead, her shadow long and unmoving. Colt Hardin kept his Henry rifle low but ready. He didn't like tight places where you couldn't see a man's hands, or a woman's for that matter. Beside him, Neve Whitebird stood stiff as a fence post, her hand brushing the bundle in Colt's coat pocket. Jonah Trace eased in behind them, his voice just above a whisper. "Colt, we're penned in here. Either she moves or we go back to that 3-way gun dance." The older woman's eyes cut to Jonah, then back to Neva. "I'm called Mara Two Feathers," she said, her English tinged with the rhythm of her mother tongue. "And I've been walking this land longer than the name Bishop was spoken here." Neve's voice was flat. "You walk it for yourself, not for me." Mara's gaze stayed steady. "You carry the spiral. You carry the debt. And debts call louder than gunfire." Colt stepped forward half a pace. "Lady, I've had my fill of other people's debts. If you've got something to say, spill it quick before the rim falls in on us." Mara's mouth curved in something that wasn't quite a smile. "You ride like a man who's buried friends without saying prayers. You'll understand." She reached into her blanket and drew out a strip of worn leather, stamped with the same obsidian spiral Nive wore. Time and weather had worn it smooth in places, but the pattern still caught the light. "This was your mother's," Mara said. "She gave it to me the day she chose exile over chains. I swore I'd keep it until the child could pay the river back." Niva's breath caught, sharp, involuntary. "My mother's dead." "Not to the land," Mara replied. "Not to the Redwater, who still sing her name when they want rain to fall." Jonah shifted uneasily. "Colt, we're burning daylight." Colt's eyes stayed on Mara. "You've got Bishop riding one side of the rim, Redwater on the other, and a bounty man chewing up the middle. If this story ends with you asking us to turn around, I'll save you the trouble and say no now." Mara didn't blink. "It ends with me telling you that the thing you carry," her eyes flicked to Colt's coat, "will decide who lives on this land come spring." From outside the fissure came a sudden crack, a rifle shot, close enough to send stone dust raining from the walls. A second shot followed, then the echo of hooves on rock. Jonah swung toward the sound. "Bishop's found the trail." Mara's voice stayed calm. "There's another way out, but it runs through ground that remembers blood." Colt gave a short, humorless laugh. "Ma'am, all ground remembers blood out here. Some just writes it deeper." "Chow thoai mien tai, so mot." Mara's eyes softened, but her tone didn't. "Then you already know, there's no trail in the West that don't cost a man something before it lets him through." "Chow thoai mien tai so high. Ho jan di chuyen." Mara led them deeper into the crack, the air turning colder, the walls slick where hidden springs had licked the stone for centuries. Nivi followed, her hand brushing the leather strip Mara had given her, as if the weight of it told more truth than words. Colt came last, his mind mapping every turn for a fast retreat if needed. The fissure opened suddenly into a cavern of basalt pillars, lit from above by a jagged mouth of sky. In the center stood 3 stones, set in a triangle, their tops worn smooth as river rock. Dried blood stained the edges. "This is the meeting place," Mara said. "Older than the white man's maps. Older than my grandmother's bones. Treaties are made here. Wars too." Before Colt could ask what kind of meeting she planned, the sound of boots and the clink of spurs echoed from the opening above. Bishop's pale hat appeared at the rim, his voice lazy but edged. "Well now, Hardin, seems you've been collecting company." Voss's voice followed, closer than expected. "And maybe a payday, if you don't mind me cutting in." Jonah cursed under his breath. "We're boxed, Colt." Colt's gaze swept the cavern. 3 stones, 1 exit, enemies converging. And in his coat pocket, the bundle Niva had trusted him with, now joined by the leather strip Mara claimed. Whatever truth lay in them was about to be tested in gunsmoke. If you were Colt, would you stand and bargain on sacred ground, or shoot your way out before the walls start talking? In the West, both choices can bury you. Please comment yes or no, so we can have more ideas. The basalt cavern swallowed sound, until even the scrape of a boot seemed too loud. Colt Hardin kept his Henry rifle across his chest, eyes shifting between the dark opening above, where Emmett Bishop's pale hat had just appeared, and the narrower passage where Calder Voss's voice echoed. Neva Whitebird stood between Colt and Mara Two Feathers, the leather strip now looped around her wrist, the hidden bundle still tucked in Colt's coat. Her gaze darted upward toward Bishop, then sideways toward the sound of spurs and metal from Voss's approach. Jonah Trace crouched behind one of the 3 blood-marked stones, working the lever on his Winchester, the click-clack loud in the cold air. "Colt, we're in a choke pen. If we're gonna run, it's now or never." Bishop's voice drifted down, lazy as a cat on a warm porch. "You've got something that belongs to me, Hardin. You hand it over, Maybe we ride out with the same number of holes we came in with." Voss laughed from the shadows. "Funny, Bishop. That's exactly my offer, minus the maybe." Colt shifted his stance, rifle angled but ready. "Thing is, boys, you're both looking at the same pot of gold and forgetting one thing. Only the first hand in gets to keep it." The air went still. Then came the first shot. It was Bishop, rifle barking from above, the bullet sparking off the basalt near Colt's head. Jonah answered in the same breath, his shot snapping Bishop's hat off the rim. Voss took that as his cue, lunging from the side corridor with revolver drawn. Colt fired once, the round shattering rock beside Voss's boot, forcing him to dive for cover. Mara moved like someone who'd done this before, pulling Neva toward the shadow of the far wall, keeping her head low. Gunfire filled the cavern, each shot cracking like split timber. Shards of basalt rained down, the air turning gritty. Jonah clipped one of Bishop's men as he tried to climb down the rim. The man tumbled, landing hard and silent. Bishop's voice lost its drawl. "Hardin, you're just digging the hole deeper." "Better than lying in it," Colt shot back. In the brief lull, Neva pulled the bundle from Colt's coat. The leather wrappings came loose in her hands, revealing what was inside. A silver inlaid map plate, no bigger than a man's palm, etched with the spiral symbol. Lines spread from it like rivers, leading to tiny marks, some shaped like hills, others like arrows. Mara's eyes widened. "It's the seed plate, the last one. With it, the Redwater can plant in the old ground without fear." Neve's fingers trembled. "And without it?" Mara's voice was a flat stone. "Without it, they starve. And men like Bishop will salt the fields to make sure." Colt glanced between them. "So, we're not just hauling trouble, we're hauling the land's heartbeat." Before they could speak again, Voss reappeared, revolver leveled. His smile was thin. "Looks like payday just showed its face." Colt moved without thinking. He grabbed Neve's shoulder, shoving her behind him as he squeezed the trigger. The shot roared, echo slamming back from the cavern walls. Voss staggered, dropped his gun, and slid down against the stone, clutching his arm. Bishop, seeing his chance, tried to drop into the cavern, but Jonah was faster. His bullet caught the rim just under Bishop's boot, and the outlaw cursed, retreating out of sight. Silence settled for half a breath, broken only by the hiss of wind through the upper cracks. Mara stepped forward, voice steady. "We have to move. That plate won't be safe until it's where it belongs." Colt nodded. "Then we take the back trail you promised." As they slipped into the shadowed passage behind the stones, Jonah muttered, "Colt, you realize both Bishop and Voss will be on us by sundown." Colt's reply was dry, almost amused. "Jonah, out here you ain't alive unless someone's trying to kill you." They vanished into the dark, the spiral plate glinting once in the dim light, like the heartbeat Mara had named it, before the fissure swallowed them whole. The fissure spat them out into the open, like a canyon mouth coughing up wind. The sun was low, its light a copper blade across the horizon. Colt Hardin swung into Shoshone's saddle before the dust from their boots had time to settle. Mara Two Feathers took point, guiding them along a sliver of trail cut into the base of a red bluff. Behind them, Jonah Trace kept his rifle balanced across the horn, eyes scanning the ridgeline. Neve Whitebird rode double with Colt, one arm wrapped around the bundle now containing the spiral seed plate. The land here was wide and quiet. Too quiet. Colt could feel the tension in Shoshone's gait, the way the gelding's ears twitched back and forth. Somewhere behind, the echoes of pursuit were gathering. Jonah broke the silence. "Bishop won't give this up. Neither will Voss if his shooting arm still works." Colt's jaw tightened. "Then we make the ground work for us. Out here, you don't outrun a man. You outthink him." They crested a low rise, and the land spilled open into a sweep of prairie, dotted with yucca and thorn. In the distance, a thin ribbon of river shimmered like glass. Mara pointed to a stand of cottonwoods along its bank. "Cross there. The river splits. Lose them in the forks." But before they could reach it, the first riders appeared on the horizon. 5 men, Bishop's pale hat at the front. The sunlight turned their dust trail into a banner of war. Colt glanced back at Neva. "You hold on tight. This is where it gets loud." They kicked their mounts into a gallop. Hooves pounded, the wind tearing at hats and coats. Jonah dropped back slightly, firing over his shoulder, the crack of his Winchester rolling across the prairie. One of Bishop's riders veered, horse stumbling, but the rest kept coming. At the cottonwoods, Mara led them into the shallows. The water was cold enough to bite, splashing high around the horses' flanks. The current tugged, but they pushed through to the far bank. From there, the river split into 3 narrow channels, each winding like a snake through the grasslands. Mara didn't slow. She took the middle fork, the willows closing in overhead. Branches clawed at their shoulders, the air damp and smelling of mud. For a few minutes, the sound of pursuit faded, replaced by the quiet trickle of water and the breathing of the horses. Neva leaned forward, voice low. "Do you think we lost them?" Colt shook his head. "You never lose a man who's hungry enough." They rode until the channel opened into a small meadow, hidden from the main prairie. Here, Mara finally drew rein. "We rest the horses," she said, "and we speak." Colt dismounted, still scanning the edges of the clearing. "Speak about what?" Mara's gaze shifted to Neva. "About what you'll do when this is over. The seed plate isn't just silver. It's the memory of the land. It's the kind of thing men kill for, and the kind of thing worth dying to. Protect 3 life lessons, woven into the journey. Protect what's truly valuable, even if others can't see its worth." To Bishop, the land was nothing more than something to strip and sell. To the Redwater people, it was where their ancestors lay, and where harvests would feed generations to come. In life, some things may look ordinary to outsiders, but they carry the weight of your history and identity. You don't always need to run faster than your pursuer. Sometimes you just need to choose the right path. Colt knew he couldn't outrun Bishop on the open plains, so he chose the river forks to erase their tracks. In business and life, victory often comes from strategy, not speed. Taking the road your rival never thought to watch. The right companions matter far more than the number of allies. Colt, Jonah, Neva, and Mara were just 4 against Bishop's gang, yet they trusted each other and knew their roles. In any struggle, a small team bound by trust will always outlast a larger, fractured force. As the sun dipped lower, painting the meadow in gold, Jonah looked at Colt. "We move at dusk. They'll expect us on the open plains, so we give them the ghost." Colt allowed a rare grin. "I've been a ghost before. I can do it again." Somewhere beyond the willows, the faint thud of hooves returned. The hunt wasn't over. It was just moving to the next stage. Closing lines for the video. In the West, every trail ends with a choice, and every choice writes its own legend. Colt, Neva, Mara, and Jonah's ride isn't finished. And neither is the story of the seed plate. What comes next may change not just their fate, but the fate of the land itself. We'll keep riding with them through dust, danger, and the truths only the frontier can teach. And maybe, somewhere along the trail, we'll find a piece of our own story in theirs. Thank you for riding with us through this frontier journey. We're continuing to create more stories filled with adventure, heart, and meaning. Tell us what you'd like to see next. Your ideas help guide where this trail will lead.